the mic, yeah, we bring the flame. Thursday nights, it's a vibe, y'all gon' know the names. SWAC Smoke on the mic, yeah, we bring the flame. Thursday nights, it's a vibe, y'all gon' know the names. C. Wells, Jamie G. Jerome, DJ 2. Facts and flavor mix, that's how the crew do. Catch us live, hit that like, don't be shy. Talking SWAC, y'all, with the jokes that fly. We ain't ducking no smoke, see us holding rank discussion. Sharp enough to make a ship sink. We got stats, we got smack all rolled in one. SWAC talk like the smoke.
What is going on? All right, everybody, man. Y'all please forgive me, man. I don't know what's going on, having some crazy technical difficulties this evening, but man, how you doing? Like I said, I didn't know like the screen wasn't showing, so I'm sorry if I was on and wasn't on, but if y'all can hear me, man, y'all just let me know that y'all can hear me. No, actually I'm in my warm house, man. I'm sitting here chilling out and trying to have a good show tonight, man. Shout out to everybody who team won today, man. I hope y'all enjoying y'all weekend, man. I thank y'all for tuning in. Gonna do a little post game show today. It is, like I say, it's supposed to snow up here tomorrow, so y'all pray for me. The weather's supposed to be a little bit colder, and it was cold today in this household. As my Jags went up to the reservation and had a pretty rough time of it, and it's been a hell of a season. But I think we can go ahead and start the. I know last week a lot of people was talking three-way ties and stuff, but I think we can go ahead and put that to bed. Shout out to Grambling and Hayden Benoit, the freshman walk-on quarterback, man, that came out and did a good job for Grambling this evening. PV found some serious offense, and I want to talk about that game a little bit. Man, 1-9 is beyond ugly, man. 1-9 is hideous. 1-9 is embarrassing. 1-9 is just unheard of, man. And I'm honestly, I'm gonna keep it real with y'all, man. I'm really almost looking forward to 1-11 because I like I said, I think if you gonna do something, you need to be remembered for doing it. And so if you're gonna be the worst team, you need to be the worst team ever. And so 1-11, man, is definitely very possible because what I saw from Southern next two opponents, it don't look pretty. So hey, I fought it a long time, man. Oh Lord, it is in that territory, man. I really think it might be worse than that. Honestly, I think it might be worse than that because JSU was competitive in them days, man. But Southern is not competitive. But I do want to touch on PV before I'm gonna kind of make my way around. Of course, I got my recap coming tomorrow, but I'm just gonna kind of touch on a couple games today. I did have the opportunity to watch three games today. So I'm gonna talk about those games and whatever else y'all want to talk about in the chat, how we do. But PV definitely found some offense, man, and they exploded in a big way. I actually caught that game probably about midpoint of second quarter, and it looked like A&M was gonna Alabama A&M was gonna control that game, man. They was up 5-0, almost like watching a baseball game. But that late score before the half for Prairie View, I think that really changed. I think that really changed the perspective of that game because Prairie View scored late at the end of the first half. Then they came out and scored after halftime, and Alabama A&M could never find an answer. I think when they dropped that pass on third down, and I think it was like 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6 right before the half, and they gave up a big run when Prairie View was deep in their own end. That really changed that game. And Cam Peters, 172, 17 of 22, 394 yards, 5 touchdowns. Josiah Rockwell had a big game. He caught three TDs. And I, like I said, the Panthers are pretty much West champs. I mean, of course, mathematically, Grambling's still alive mathematically, but nobody's gonna catch Prairie View. Prairie View's not gonna lose their last two. That they're not gonna lose out. So at this point, the Panthers are pretty much the West representatives, and they had a good bounce back game here. I think when you look at coming off of that loss last week, you didn't really know how those guys would respond, but they did a really good job, and they for all intents and purposes they shut A&M down, only giving up 204 yards of offense to the Bulldogs. So that defense from Prairie View is they're very capable, and I think they did a really good job of fighting back and keeping themselves in this game till they can make a move. And they were able to make a move in a big way, scoring 35 points in the second half alone. So that's how you knock, that's how you knock a team out, because you don't, they were hanging around. Alabama, and they were hanging around. The game was ugly, and Prairie View was finally able to make some things happen. And when you do that, you put yourself in position to win games, and that's what championship teams do. They find ways to survive, and they find ways to win. So big win now for Prairie View. Texas Southern, they looked like they were gonna give Alabama State. I mean, they gave them a good run, but they really looked like they were really gonna just kind of wear the Hornets out. And the second half, Alabama State was able to keep TSU off the board, outscoring them 21-0 in the second half. a missed field goal late in the game. Well, like in the midpoint of the third quarter, I think it was, that kind of stopped the scoring drive. And then they got a field goal block late that Bama State returned for a touchdown. So that's, those are the kind of plays that hurt you in games like this. At Alabama State, with Smoot at quarterback, they still, they weren't, super sharp, but they were able to make things happen. And again, another big game. Not a great running game for them today. Only 118 yards on the ground, but Marcus Harris continued to score multiple touchdowns. He scored 3 in this game. Smoot threw for 215. So not an outstanding offensive game, but they did a really solid game, really solid job moving the ball when they needed to. The only thing was defensively, TSU was able to gash them. They were able to gash them for 255 on the ground. And yeah, that is really what TSU season has been like all year. A play here, a play there. Things could be different. They're not necessarily the kind of team that can go toe to toe with you, point for point and blow for blow with you. But if they can, they can dictate the tempo and everything of the game, they can keep themselves in it. And I thought they did a good job of maintaining, but they just couldn't get over the hump at the end. Like I said, second half, they just couldn't put points on the board. They came up short on 2 field goals, which, with one field goal, the score was 28-24. That would have brought them to within 1. And, another field goal, would have probably had them down 35 to 30. So they still were within the striking distance. And yeah, this is one of those games that, like you said, stats in this game don't really tell a tale because TSU did what they wanted. They had, they had Renfro average 8.1 yards per carry. He had 145 yards. Cooper threw for 220 and 2 touchdowns. Those are numbers that you should win in the majority of your games. But, when you can't when you can't stop the big plays and you kind of shoot yourself in the foot, those kind of things come back and bite you. And, that's why this team is kind of in the point that they are. They are a dangerous team because week to week, you don't really know how to attack them. And defensively, they're typically a pretty solid defense. And they played well here, well enough to win on both sides of the ball. But, the big plays really, really hurt them. And that's one of those things that kind of put you in that position to kind of not get it done. And those are the things that hurt you. And those are the things that had you looking crazy on the coach's call on Monday because you had this game under control. You had a lot of things. A couple weeks ago, you had a lot of things in your back pocket in terms of, challenging for the division. And now, you're basically out of it. But you still got opportunity to finish strong. So you will see how TSU play this string out. Bama State needed this win. They got to keep pace with JSU. Of course, they need JSU to lose again. But if you don't win, then it don't even matter. So I think that they can make some things happen here. And they got a couple games in front of them that they should be able to win. And just, see what happens from now. But at this point, I think for informally, I think our championship game is set. We still have to kind of go through some official stuff, but I think it's pretty much set. And we'll talk about that as we move forward. Pine Bluff showed a lot of fight in the fourth quarter against FAMU, scoring 21 points to make that game a closer game than what it was at a certain point. FAMU was up 17-7 at the start of fourth quarter. Pine Bluff was able to get some things done. Christian Peters, 333 yards, 3 touchdowns on the through the air. But the Golden Lions, they just couldn't really get that last play that they needed at the crucial time. No interceptions for Peters this time, which is big because he's been a guy who's turned the ball over, a decent clip this season. And so they're a team that they have some potential. They just not really putting it, not really putting it all together consistently. They're definitely the kind of team that if you don't show up to play, they'll handle you. FAMU was able to run the ball really well in this game, over 200 yards on the ground. They threw for 235, so they were able to kind of make some things happen. But Pine Bluff, they kept up the fight, and throwing for over 300 yards in this game was a big key for them. And so I don't know, like I said, I don't know where Coach Hampton ends up at the end of this, but I think at this point, he probably, is safe, at least for next season. The key is, they're gonna be losing a good bit of guys. We'll see how they, how they recruit and what they bring in, but they played a lot better these last couple of weeks than I kind of anticipated, because I really was probably one of their biggest skeptics, because I think that, with the schedule they played out of conference, you really didn't have a good idea what this team was. But, they were able to kind of make some things happen here. Came up short in this one, but, you already did won basically as many or more games in conference than you won in a minute. So, it's for them, it's a successful, I won't say successful, but it's a better season, because this was a team I thought might tap out at 3 wins, because they didn't necessarily have a great schedule in front of them, but they were able to kind of find their way and at least compete. And when you can compete, you put yourself in a good spot. Grambling, big win here. When I found out that they was playing a kid that was 17 years old at quarterback, I really didn't know what to expect from Grambling in this game. But Cam Ransom had a rough start to this game for Bethune-Cookman. He couldn't really hold on to the ball. Grambling pressure got to him a good bit early. He had a couple fumbles. He lost one, was able to dive on the other one, but just couldn't. Grambling kept him off balance offensively, which I thought Grambling could have made something happen with their offense to put the pressure on Grambling, especially with Grambling playing a young guy at quarterback. But they did a really good job. Speaking of Grambling, with the running game to really kind of balance it, but they were aggressive with the passing game too. They went downfield, and Hayden Benoit had a good game, going 12 or 20 for 220 yards and 4 touchdowns. He had an interception, but this is a kid first start, kid 17 years old, walk on. They made a lot of things easy for him, and that's what really helps him. When you could run the ball for 197 yards, that also helps. And when Bethune-Cookman just couldn't, they just couldn't get it going. Grambling defensively kind of held him down to a good degree, especially on the ground, and kept them off balance. And once they started making changes, switching out quarterbacks and stuff, you kind of find yourself in a position that you probably not going to have a lot of success. And Grambling is improved. I think I saw this is their first winning season since 2019. So they're probably gonna finish second in the division. And at one point it did not look like that. And that that's coaching, and that's sticking to a game plan. They at the beginning of the season, Coach Joseph said they're gonna run the football, and they stuck to that. Whether it win or loss, they stuck to it. And I just like to see a team that when you lose people, you don't pack it in. I mean, hey, Doc, chaos ain't not. This is the SWAC, so anything can happen in these next couple of weeks, and ain't nothing concrete. So we don't know what's gonna happen with the week. So we still got some. We still got a couple more weeks of potential chaos that could happen, because you just never know in this league. But I think this was a game that Bethune-Cookman. I think this was a game that they had to kind of step up, because they, last week well, this week, I guess you say, leading up to the game, they were one of those teams that a lot of people really kind of jumped them to the top because of their record. I think I think that they still they still got some work to do. But this is a game that you need if you want to be that kind of team. You can't really come out and allow a team to kind of get the jump on you when they have more disadvantages than you at that point. I thought they just looked like a potential a potential I thought they looked like a potential typical Bethune-Cookman team these last couple of years, just not really there. The explosiveness really wasn't there. The guys was slipping and falling all over the place. They just really had that bad juju on them, and it caught up to them. So I still think again, a strong finish is always possible. You want to finish in the top half if you're a team like this. So we'll see how they rebound, because this could be one of the situations where they don't handle it well, because they not this group is not used to being in this position, and maybe they show some fight and they bounce back. But I think for a lot of people, they were looking, and not the team. I don't think the team was, but I think a lot of people on the outside were looking beyond this game to next week for Bethune-Cookman. But when you're a contender, you can't look beyond the week that you win, and you have to play your best all the time. And if you don't play your best, you have to still find ways to make it happen. And they were still in this game late. Grambling just was able to score a late touchdown and kind of put the game on ice, and and find themselves with the win. And so, like I said, Grambling 7 wins. They could win 9 games. They got Alcorn and Alcorn and Southern left. Those 2 games that they can win. So Grambling could win 9 games. It's not out the realm of possibility. And before the season, I wouldn't have thought that. But I think they've been able to do it a lot with defense and turnovers, and the offense kind of chips in here and there, and it's working for them. They defense has stepped up big time, and like I said, they're a team that can turn you over, and when you can turn teams over, that always going to have you in a position for your offense to do better. I mean, if your offense had to drive the length of the field, that helps a lot. And and they're capable on special teams, which is another thing that can kind of get you over the top in some games, especially when your offense ain't playing well like they had last week, where their defense and special teams won that game last Saturday, because the offense only had 142 yards. So you need that. Each unit at some point got to carry the rest, and that's what they did. Jackson State, typical game when they go to Edabina. Valley gonna always come out and give it a shot. They're gonna play hard, but Jackson State was able to kind of they never really were challenged, but Valley kept it close for a while, and Jackson State was able to run the ball pretty well. For them, 217, that's not necessarily a Jackson State running game this season, but they ran the ball pretty well. Lockhart, 2 touchdowns and 241 through the air. Defensively, they kind of held Valley down under 200 yards of offense, which I never really was concerned about too much. What I wasn't even too much concerned with this game, because I just knew as long as Jackson State showed up to play and they don't turn over the ball, they're gonna be fine. And that's what this was. This was a by the books game. It was good to see, Nate Rimber come back to Valley and have 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, you always want to show out when you come back home. And yeah, Lockhart above 70%. Good reps for him. you kind of, I know a lot of people probably kind of wanted to see some other people get in there, but good reps for him in a game like this, because y'all know playing at Valley can be, sometimes it can be sleepy for you. You can go through the motions and you go through the motions and you find yourself in a game. But they did a good job here of taking care of business. Not a lot to write home about. And that's kind of what you want in a game like this. You want this game to, when you play a team like this, you want this game to be boring, because you want your team to be able to take care of business and get in and get out. So that's what, I think that's what happened with Jackson State. I think the train is back on track after a hiccup. The train back on track, and they still the front runners, and they're in the driver's seat in the East. So that's pretty much that. This last game, man, I don't even really I don't even really know what to say about Southern no more. I didn't basically say all I could say about Southern, but this game was a typical 2025 Southern football game. If you haven't really watched Southern much, A, you're not missing a lot, and B, Southern games typically go like this. They're good for one drive, or maybe two, but they're good for a touchdown drive. And then the defense just allowed the floodgates to open. And it's just been it's been everything. Like, sometimes when you look at a team, you say, okay, the defense not playing well, but the offense is playing well, and this team losing shootouts. Or the offense ain't playing well, but the defense keeping them in the games. They just can't get off the field. They got to keep coming back on the field because the defense, because the offense ain't moving the ball. But with Southern this season, it's everything, and special teams, and I don't know how many of y'all watch previews and listen to me in the preseason, but one of the things I harped on with Southern preseason was special teams, and special teams has been brutal for Southern this season. I'm talking about block punts, shank punts, muff punts, kickoffs going through people's legs, poor kickoffs, trying to do these corner kicks and stuff instead of booting it through the end zone, giving up multiple yards of field position. Whenever you do score, you're giving up extra field position. Now the team starting at the 45 instead of the 30 or the 25. Not fair catching kicks, trying to run it out the end zone. When you have a team that offensively can't consistently drive the ball down the field, why hurt yourself with field position? Yeah, I mean, at this point, Trey Holly is like 250 yards from 1,000. He ain't gonna get there because he got 10 carries in this game for 13 yards. But at this point, man, you rode that horse and you're not even helping him out. So why let that dude take this wear and tear on a team like this? He gave it his all. They didn't help him in return. The quarterback play has not been there. It's just been an ugly season, man. And I don't know how, like I said, I don't know the demographics of everybody out there, but for me, this is honestly, without hyperbole, the worst Southern football team I've seen in my whole life. I'm 49 years old. This is the worst team I've ever seen. I just feel like whenever you watch this team play, at least when I watch this team play, I feel like I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. So when Southern tied the game up at 7, Southern went up 7-0. So when Southern took the lead at the beginning of the game, I just was waiting for Alcorn to score and go on that run that everybody goes on. I never really had any feeling that Southern was going to win this game, because at this point, I'm not even looking for that anymore. But this is one of those things that you got. I think you just got to rock bottom. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you rock bottom, and and go from there, man, because you can't keep putting Band-Aids on bullet wounds. And that's what we've been doing, and that's been helping, every night, you sneak out of the division championship, then the next year you fall off, then, you come back with another division championship, then you drop off again. I think at this point, man, this is a rebuild. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but this is a rebuild, and it still got some ugliness in here that gotta happen before it get better. It's at the point now we just got to rip the Band-Aid off and just let it do what it do. So Alcorn, they were able to benefit from some things, and they got a good game from Reggie Davis running the ball. They ran for over 250 yards. They did everything that they needed to do, but this was you could, and this is no disrespect to Alcorn, but you could take any team in the SWAC and line them up against Southern, and you're gonna have the same exact game. I feel like if Southern played Valley this week, Valley would beat Southern by 3 touchdowns. Southern is just like my boy Will Wallace said, Southern is ass, and y'all know for weeks I fought that, but I admit it, man. We just not there, and so the bottom has completely fell out, and I'm just gonna go through the end of the season, these last couple of seasons. I don't, like I said, I don't know what his motivation and focus is. But I thought this. I'm gonna tell you, I thought this team. I don't want to say was turning the corner, but I thought this team took some good steps against FAMU, and the very next week against Pine Bluff, everything went back to normal. So like I said, I don't know what his future holds, but I think anybody holding out hope for him at Southern, I think you can put that out. I mean, man, at this point, we lose to Catholic High by 4 touchdowns. Like I'm just like we just not there. It's just it's not even competitive losses, and I think that's the thing that really irks me is that it's not even. Nobody wants to lose. Let's go ahead and keep it. Let's just go ahead and keep it there. Nobody like to lose. Nobody want to lose. But if you're gonna lose, at least put up a fight. And this team is not putting up fights, and that does it to you all the time. So, I'm like I said, I'm just at the point where I'm just gonna enjoy these last couple of weeks. I was talking to my wife yesterday, and she was like, "This is the first Bayou Classic that we're gonna miss since we moved to Baton Rouge in 2016." Which, I wouldn't have been there anyway this year, but this was like the first one. And I said it to her. I say, do you really think we probably would have went to the game and we would still down there? I don't know, but now, I'm gonna probably catch a little bit of it on TV, but I'm pretty much out of that. And that's that, man. So that's basically week 11, man. Like I said, I don't want to go too deep into everything because I still have my recap that I'm gonna have tomorrow. I'm honestly on the basketball. I know a lot of y'all are still in football season, but I'm in basketball mode. So I'm hopefully trying to have my basketball preview out this week. Because that's what my focus is. It's trying to put the pads up and get them gym shoes out and hit the court. Because the season is over. But like I said, I got my recap coming tomorrow. So y'all make sure y'all check me out on there. And I have more thoughts and things on these games. I don't want to go too deep into it. That's one other thing I want to say before I get out of here. The attendance in these games have been kind of brutal, man. And I know it's tough for some people. Like I say, times is hard right now. And it's easy to not go to games when your team ain't doing so well. But when you watch a game on TV and you see that camera aimed at the visiting side or whatever you want to call it, and there's nobody in there, it makes for a dreary sight, man. And so, hopefully the weather can maintain the last couple of weeks and we get some decent crowds in these games because, it at least, even if it's for aesthetics, it makes things look a little bit better. But yeah, that game, that crowd was kind of rough. And when they showed the crowd at Grambling, it was pretty rough. And I don't know what the business side looked like at Alcorn, but I'm quite sure it was light. I don't know how many of y'all Jaguars made that trip up to Larman, but I don't think it was a lot of them, at least from what I'm deducing. And I dread to see what the crowd gonna be like at Mumford on Saturday, but I'll be checking it out. And so, man, like I said, with that, I'm gonna get on up out of here, man. Like I say, I try not to go too long on Saturday nights whenever we do this, because I got my preview. I mean, I got my recap coming, and I want to say some stuff for that. So, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read comments. Oh yeah, that definitely, it's always a spike in attendance, and sometimes you boost it by having solid seasons, and when you don't have that, and you have those those couple games at home that you have as big, the rest of them are gonna look crazy. And November games typically are lighter attended, even when you have good teams, because the weather started to get a little crisp, and everybody don't want to be outside in that kind of weather, but it is what it is at this point. And so, like I said, man, I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here, and I'll be back on here tomorrow, man, with my recap of week 11. And like I said, I want to try to have my basketball preview out out on Monday. Looking at these numbers for attendance, Texas, Alabama State, 17,000. Grambling, 6,000. Alabama A&M, 1,100. FAMU Pine Bluff, 650. 6,500. So yeah, I mean that's rough. But those games weren't necessarily games that people wanna come out. So Valley had 8,900, which is not a surprise. Jackson State always have a big crowd in Valley come there, and they say Alcorn at 1,400, 14,500. So hey, those some good souls to show up at that game. Like I said, some people count tickets sold, some people count, the turnstiles and the scanners. Or if you Norfolk State, you count all the people who are outside, and get your numbers that way. But that's always gonna be, one of the things that we go back and forth on. But like I said, man, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this one up tonight. And y'all make sure y'all check my recap coming. It'll probably be dropping around noon time, Central Time. So y'all make sure y'all keep it locked here, and I'll catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.